For this project, what we were interested in learning more about is how students move into and out of special education, and also how they change between primary disability categories over time. And in order to do this, we analyzed annual data that was collected between 2014-15 school year and the 2017-18 school year on students in the K-12 school system from the core school districts. So that's Fresno, Garden Grove, Long Beach, LA, Oakland, Sacramento, San Francisco, and Santa Ana. So from our analysis, we first looked at how students are entering special education in grades K through 12 in those school districts. So what we did is we took a sample of students that did not have an IEP in one given school year, and then we reviewed those same students in the next school year to see if they had entered special education. And what we found were that the highest entrance rates into special education occurred during the early elementary school years, and the lowest entrance rates into special education occurred in 8th grade. We also noted that there was a slight increase in the number of students entering special education when there was a change in kind of our traditional school settings. So meaning as students had transitioned into middle school, transitioned into high school, or were being set to transition into post-secondary opportunities. So after that, we evaluated how students were exiting special education. So oppositely, this time we took a sample of students that had an IEP in one given grade level, and then looked at whether or not they still had an IEP in the next grade level. And what we found were that the highest exit rates for students with disabilities on an IEP occurred in high school, and the lowest exit rates were observed in the middle school years. The last part of our analysis looked at how students were moving between special education disability categories. So what we tried to do was use a 3-year window of the data, given that eligibility for special education is determined every 3 years. And what we did is after looking at all 13 different categories for special education eligibility, we noted that students who qualify under the category of emotional disturbance and a specific speech and language impairment, they seem to demonstrate the most movement in between categories. So we chose to focus on those 2 disability categories, and we also looked at students who had a Section 504 plan and how they transitioned into special education from that plan. So first, in looking at the transitions of students who qualified with a primary disability category of a speech and language impairment, what we found was that the percentage of them exiting special education in any given year didn't vary greatly from between grade levels. We saw some increase in terms of the number of students graduating, or not graduating, who are transitioning out of special ed, exiting in the middle school and early high school years. But we found that students that had a speech and language impairment were most likely, if they were going to transition into a different special education eligibility category, to transition into a specific learning disability. Next, we looked at students who initially had a primary disability category of emotional disturbance. And we found that there was quite a bit of movement 3 years later in students with that eligibility category. We found that most students were most likely to be reclassified either under other health impairment or a specific learning disability from the emotional disturbance category. Excuse me. And then finally, we looked at the transitions of students who had a Section 504 plan. So a Section 504 plan is not special education, but it is a special type of plan that is support for students with disabilities as well. And what we found was that students that had one of these Section 504 plans were most likely to enter special education under the other health impairment or a specific learning disability categories. One other thing that we noted was that students on a 504 plan were most likely to exit their 504 plan in the middle school years. And those students weren't necessarily being transitioned onto an IEP, a special education plan. plan. So kind of one of our overall takeaways from this project and our review of the data was just this knowledge that we all have, that it's critical that we ensure that students have this kind of continuity and stability of their educational experiences. And when a student is exiting, whether it be a 504 plan or their IEP, it's just critical that we're really thoughtful about the types of supports they may need as they make that successful transition.